Yeah, there's definitely a lot of interesting overlap there as it relates to, the Epstein-Clinton relationship, but I doubt they'll go down the Israel line. It seems like it branches out a lot more than, people would like to think.
So recently, Whitney Webb revealed that the Epstein story is a bipartisan cover-up on the Sabby Sabs podcast, and she talks about how Epstein's associations reached far and wide into all sorts of worlds that the mainstream media is not talking about right now. So she's written the best book on the Epstein story, if you ask me, so let's get her take on this. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel.
The way the media and the powers that be and whatever have tried to manage media coverage of the Epstein case is have it be like a partisan thing. And so the Trump administration is uncomfortable with a lot of the pressure they've gotten from their handling of the Epstein document release and the speculation that has provoked. Right. And so the best way for them to get away from people talking about the Epstein-Trump relationship in ways that are uncomfortable is to move it to the other side, which, as I have said a few times, is the Epstein-Clinton relationship. So basically mainstream media, and I'm sure this will be the same line Congress takes, I'll only really talk about an Epstein-Clinton relationship after Clinton was no longer president. So that would be the well-known trips that Epstein and Clinton, that Clinton took on Epstein's plane, like the trip to Africa, the trip to Asia. These were pretty much entirely associated with Clinton setting up his post-presidential philanthropies, like the Clinton Foundation, the Clinton Health Access Initiative, and the Clinton Global Initiative, which Epstein's defense lawyers later claimed Epstein had a significant role in creating. And of course, the Clinton Foundation later on has ties to the Maxwell family. They inject $1 million plus into Ghislaine Maxwell's Terramar. Her nephew, Alexander Gerassi, works in the State Department under Hillary Clinton, and he had previously been a liaison between Isabel Maxwell's foundation and the Clinton Foundation. And Isabel Maxwell, of course, is Ghislaine's sister.
And to be clear, I don't talk about the Epstein story as a partisan thing. I want answers regardless of who gets credit and who's involved. I think the, most plausible scenario is that people from both parties in the United States are involved. But to add some clarity here, she's talking about 17 meetings that Epstein had with Clinton while Clinton was president. And it seems like the arranger of these meetings, the one that managed them, was a guy named Mark Middleton, who himself mysteriously died a few years back by both being hung and having a shotgun blast to his chest. So there are connections between Epstein and Clinton while Clinton was president that isn't getting a lot of buzz. I mean, this is being handled partisanly, as she talks about, but some people have been remarkably consistent talking about this regardless of who's in power. Thomas Massie being one in the Republican side, and Ron Wyden actually being one on the Democratic side, and you don't hear that much about either of those two and what they think.
So, who has a lot of ties to what she called her father's Rolodex. So her father being Robert Maxwell, like a pretty well-documented Israeli spy. And some of the figures in those Rolodex are figures like Ehud Barak and Shimon Peres, former prime ministers of Israel. So, yeah, there's definitely a lot of interesting overlap there as it relates to, the Epstein-Clinton relationship, but I doubt they'll go down the Israel line because we're talking about, U.S. Congress, and we're talking about the Trump administration, who are very affiliated with the current Israeli government for sure. We may see some stuff about Ehud Barak come out in that. I don't know, because Ehud Barak was one of the people that pressured Clinton to pardon Mark Rich, for example.
So yeah, she's talking about potentially Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton being interviewed to talk about this, to be deposed in this again. And, when the DOJ is controlled by a particular administration, the administration can tailor the questions being asked in a specific way so as not to be embarrassing toward that administration, which is, let's face it, very pro-Israel. I mean, Biden's was too, but, Trump basically boasts about how pro-Israel he is, and he has been since his first term. If you haven't seen this during this term, I don't know what to tell you, because the Israel lobby has its talons sunk deeply into Trump. But yeah, Epstein's associations with Israel stretch far and wide. It's not just Robert Maxwell Maxwell. It's with Ehud Barak, like she said, who stayed at his home for prolonged periods of time. It's connections that he had with Ari Ben-Menashe, who said that Epstein was an Israeli asset. It's associations with Douglas Leese and Adnan Khashoggi, arms traffickers on the Israel side of the Iran-Contra scandal, because arms were filtered from the United States to Israel, then to go to Iran. So that's where we're at here. These associations don't stop with this either. I could go on and on.
At the sort of around the as he was leaving the presidency, and then later, not that long after, gets very publicly involved with Epstein, and also gets involved with Ron Burkle, who is probably best known for owning a bunch of supermarkets like Kroger, I believe, and he accompanied Clinton on one of these philanthropic development flights, but also ended up hiring Clinton not that long after that. And Burkle, of course, also has pretty significant ties to Diddy in the same period of time. And I think Michael Jackson as well. So a lot of, yeah, I know you think more people would talk about Ron Burkle, but they don't. It's strange. But anyway, this is all significant, I think, too, because I doubt there is going to be any serious discussion if the Clintons are brought to Congress to ask them about Epstein's 17 visits to the Clinton White House in the 90s.
Agreed. And that's no mystery that there won't be any kind of questioning along those lines. There won't be much questioning regarding Israel, if there is any at all. Ghislaine Maxwell was interviewed and moved to kind of a low-security Texas prison. It's fake news to say she's on work release. That was a rumor that was spreading there for a few days. Her lawyers have denied it, and it doesn't seem to be true as of now. But a lot of people think that this is setting up to be a pardon of Maxwell. I think that's the only way Trump can pour more gasoline on this fire that's burning right now over Epstein right now. So I don't see it unless it's really late in his term. But are we going to get any kind of transcript of, the deposition that she gave to the DOJ recently at all? I don't think so. I would have liked to seen that live stream, that's for sure, to see what they were talking about. But there aren't going to be answers to this. It's clear that the Trump administration has weighed the cost-benefit analysis between revealing what is in those Epstein files and deciding to suffer losses in the midterms, which is likely to happen on this trajectory, and they've decided to suffer losses. So if that doesn't tell you something, I don't know what will. This is a bipartisan cover-up.
I doubt they will go there. And that's because one of the figures that Clinton was most often, that Epstein was most often meeting with was a man named Mark Middleton, who worked in the White House. And Mark Middleton, after it was reported, I think first by the Daily Mail, the full extent of the meetings at the White House, and that Middleton was the main guy he was meeting with, died of a very, honestly, impossible suicide. And the images and forensic evidence collected at the scene of his death were sealed by a court, like right after, so no one can look at it.
Speaking of...
Yeah, like I said, he was hung with an extension cord and with a shotgun blast to the chest. That's what she means by impossible suicide. Just like many of the figures related to this case die mysteriously and dead men can tell no tales. That's the case with Mark Middleton, too, who was the liaison between President Clinton and Jeffrey Epstein.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. No, I was just going to say he was found at this property owned by this NGO called Heifer Ranch, hanging from a tree with a shotgun blast to the chest. Seems pretty improbable. And that was the same year that Jean-Luc Brunel died in prison. So there's like a lot of weird stuff here. And I sort of posit, well, not sort of, I do posit in my book reasons why Epstein would have been meeting with Middleton during this time, because Middleton was basically involved in the scandal that's remembered today as Chinagate, but it was really the second coming of Iran-Contra, I think. And Epstein at the time, through Leslie Wexner, had taken control of Southern Air Transport, the long, it used to be owned by the CIA, and then it was indirectly owned by, CIA people, and was, the main airline of choice for Iran-Contra for smuggling drugs and arms and all sorts of things. And so when Leslie Wexner bought it, and at this point Epstein had power of attorney over all of Wexner's affairs and was basically running his portfolio, it moved from headquarters in Miami, where it was going to Latin America and back into, Mena, Arkansas, and all of that. Instead starts going from Columbus, Ohio, where Wexner is based, to Hong Kong. And what were they trafficking?
Yeah, a lot of people don't mention the fact that Epstein had a lot of experience as a money launderer. He learned this art at Bear Stearns. He would move money on behalf of his clients to, get around taxes and things like that. But he established this expertise, and that's what drug him into his associations with arms traffickers like Adnan Khashoggi and like Douglas Lease and like, what spilled into the 90s. And a lot of people talk about Epstein as if he was a stupid dupe, but no, I think he was very skilled in money laundering. And that's something that you rarely hear about in connection to Epstein. It's all about the child sex trafficking ring. And that's important too. I mean, that avenue is, more than important to cover, but it really is concealed, the fact that he was a money launderer.
Right. I just saw something recently. It was a documentary about what happened to Abercrombie and Fitch. And there's a lot of focus on the former CEO there. And there was a connection there with him to Wexner. And it's interesting because it was just like, I think about a year ago, I covered where he was also arrested for sex trafficking, but he was released on bail. It seems like there's a connection here to the modeling industry as well. I noticed you wrote about Naomi Campbell and how she,
Yeah, I'll have a lot about that in my next piece. A lot about that. So I'd be happy to come back on and talk about it when it's out, because there is absolutely a lot going on here with the model industry, especially the John Casablanca's founded firm, Elite Model Management. And one of the people that I'll be writing about that's in the Trump administration right now is actually a protege of John Casablanca's, from my research, that got very involved with Trump.
Yeah, and Jean-Luc Brunel, one of Epstein's associates that was actually about to go down for crimes too. He was arrested by the French authorities and mysteriously, suicided. Shortly thereafter, he was an associate with Epstein. He founded a modeling company. If you think about it, I guess it's the perfect cover. If you're a sexual pervert and child molester, that's what these people were. That's what Brunel and Epstein were. And despite the fact that he also committed suicide and died like that, you don't hear about the fact that he was Epstein's client, and he was, if not client, direct associate, even though that DOJ and FBI memo said there's no proof that Epstein had any clients or associates that were guilty of these crimes. It's absolutely absurd that they even put that out there, given what we do know and is documented about Jean-Luc Brunel himself.
In the 1990s. So there's a lot of very strange things going on around that, and sort of the elite hosted Look of the Year contests, which basically have teen girls. And a lot of the winners seem to marry older, wealthy men, like as soon as they're legal. Or, if you're John Casablancas, you marry them before you're legal by going to another country and tell people publicly that you like child women. It's a quote. It's messed up.
The whole thing's messed up. I mean, his 727, his customized 727 Epstein's, was called the Lolita Express, and he didn't name it that. Other people named it that after having ridden on it. So if that tells you anything, that tells it all.
oh
To
my
say the
God.
least. But I would, I don't want to talk about an article too much before it's out, but there is a lot there that is very uncomfortable and needs to be, I think, very much looked at. But I would say, for example, I here trying to think of the best tidbit to drop. So basically, Elite, its European branch was run by a guy named Gerard Marie, who was accused by a litany of women of all sorts of terrible crimes, including assault and trafficking. And he didn't go to prison for it, but a lot of women came forward, and one of the accusers of him said that she was basically set up with the weapons dealer Adnan Khashoggi, that Khashoggi paid Marie 50 grand just to meet her, and that she was pressured by him and Khashoggi into basically becoming his girlfriend when she was very, very young.
Khashoggi was a client of Epstein's in the 80s, by the way. It's not known whether he actually invested money on behalf of Khashoggi, but he was closely associated. And this was during Iran-Contra, by the way.
And, this is in the 80s. Khashoggi is, was allegedly, according to Vicky Ward, a client of Jeffrey Epstein's at the time, and was one of the main figures in the Iran-Contra operation, which was CIA and Israeli intelligence. And Robert Maxwell was involved in Iran-Contra, and a lot of these figures that you see in the Epstein scandal as well. So, I mean, it seems like it branches out a lot more than, people would like to think, to say the least.
It sure does. That's the Epstein story, and I'm so glad to hear Whitney talk about this, the avenue of Epstein's life that's just totally ignored by most people that seem to be talking about this, except, the dissidents and the biographers like Whitney. Her book, again, is excellent, One Nation Under Blackmail. You should get it. And the reason why I'm happy to hear her talk about this is because it might hold the keys to what the truth is regarding Epstein. The fact that we're talking so much about the sex trafficking crimes, again, is valuable. It was probably part of an Israeli blackmail operation because he had a lot of associations with Israel. Basically, most of his intelligence connections do point to Israel, to Ehud Barak, to Robert Maxwell, to Ari Ben-Menashe, to Adnan Khashoggi, etc. There are more there too. But his experience in money laundering is the type of experience that would make him valuable also to intelligence agencies as an asset. He could be the guy that helps them get around the obstacles that are caused by these arms trafficking deals. And that's what he seemed to do in the 80s with Douglas Leese and Adnan Khashoggi. It seemed to have spilled into the 90s, according to Whitney Webb. And, people do talk about the Epstein story as a partisan affair. They fit it into partisan boxes like Whitney talks about. We've talked a lot about Trump's associations with Epstein. We've talked about a lot about Clinton's associations with Epstein on this channel. I don't have a horse in this race. I want the truth regarding Epstein's connections, his clients, the people involved in his operations, and most especially his connections to intelligence agencies or an agency. I think most likely Mossad, maybe CIA, who knows? But what we do seem to know is the way that they're behaving in a manner that's covering this up would be conducive to being embarrassed by Epstein's associations, presumably to Israel, when it's committing a genocide and there's no stopping it by the United States. What could, make more, tension occur in relation to Israeli relations than if that were to come out, especially right now, as Netanyahu plans to occupy Gaza completely and just take the rest of it over completely. So that's where we're at. I think the most likely scenario is Epstein had close associates involved in crimes among both parties. And maybe that's easy for me to say because I'm not part of both parties, but the documented evidence we have shows that to be true. He donated to both Republicans and Democrats. He hung out as close, friendly relationships with Republicans and Democrats. Trump was his good friend in the 90s up until about 2004. All the evidence seems to indicate they had a break at that point. And he seemed darn close to Clinton for, the 90s and 2000s. We know he was very close to Ehud Barak after his child molestation charges and after his sentencing for that sweetheart deal too. So whatever the truth is, I don't think we're going to find it. But what we do know is all the signs point to a bigger story here than has been revealed to us. And the way that the Trump administration is handling this even just hammers that point down even more. But I do want to hear from you. Let me know down below. Is Whitney Webb right? Is this a bipartisan cover-up? What do you think the most plausible explanation is regarding Epstein and his associations? And let me know, do you ever think we'll get answers on this story short of a whistleblower coming forward? Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell below. Please subscribe to Sabrina Salvati too. I really appreciate her podcast and her program here in interviewing Whitney. And please consider becoming a YouTube member. If you click the join button below, you can help support the channel. And in return, as a gift, I'll give you access to all of my videos before they go live on YouTube, the ones that are members only. And until I see you guys next time, no more war, no more debt, no more inflation, and no more empire. Peace out, guys. Catch you in the next one.